Good day, Junior Tuckies. I am Mrs. Beardenkamp, and in today's lesson, I will be teaching you the analysis of poetry. What is imagery? Imagery is creating an image in a person's mind using words, literally like painting a picture with words. Imagery engages all of the human senses: touch, hearing, taste, sight, and smell. Figurative language, like metaphors, are used to create imagery. Let's look at the different types of imagery that we get. Firstly is visual imagery, sight. Second, auditory imagery, hearing. Third, olfactory imagery, smell. Number 4, gustatory imagery, taste. And number 5, tactile imagery, touch. Let's look at how imagery can be achieved on the next slide. How is imagery achieved? Figurative language is used to create imagery, just like I mentioned on the previous slide. Figurative language also helps create different meanings to words beside the literal meaning. Do you remember denotation and connotation? Denotation being the literal understanding of the word, and connotation being the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions. That's where figurative language comes in. For example, you are my sunshine, meaning the person lights up your life or your day. If we had to take this literally, this would be quite weird, maybe looking like the baby from Teletubbies. The difference between imagery and figurative language is that figurative language can be literal too, just like when a poet describes a setting. Let's have a look at an example from Dulce et Decorum Est. It describes how soldiers were utterly exhausted while walking through a battlefield during World War I. Knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge, till on the haunting flares we turned our backs. Over here, figurative language has been used to describe setting. Figures of speech that create imagery, of course it is a metaphor, a comparison without using like or as, a simile, a comparison using like or as, personification, giving human qualities to an inanimate object, the sound devices, alliteration, assonance, onomatopoeia, and then finally hyperbole, the exaggeration. Remember, you do not need to use figurative language to create imagery. Let's look at examples of imagery on the next slide. Examples of imagery. This is an extract from Alfred Tennyson's Summer Night. Nor waves the cypress in the palace walk, nor winks the goldfin in the porphyry front. The fiery wakens thou with me. Now, an extract from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright, her beauty hangs upon the cheeks of night, like a rich jewel in an Aethiop's ear. In these two examples, we can see how imagery has been used to create the setting, to describe to us in Alfred Tennyson's poem the atmosphere, and in Romeo and Juliet to describe Juliet herself. Why do we use imagery? It engages the reader to draw them and capture their imagination. It also creates interest, so the text is actually gripping and a page turner, just like those books that you can't put down. It sets a scene and it also helps communicate character traits to the reader, so the reader is able to visualize what the character looks like and also what the atmosphere looks like, without explicitly explaining it in a boring and uninteresting way. What is metafication? Metafication is a self-conscious literary style. But what does that actually mean? It means that the characters in the novel are actually aware that they are a work of fiction and are living in a fictitious world. The self-aware narrator often infuses their thoughts and ideas into the storyline. We often see metafication in novels, short stories, plays, video games, film, and in TV. Metafication can be used as a parody or to make fun of literary genre rules, to undermine expectations, and to reveal truths or even comment on the human condition. Let's see how metification is achieved on the next slide. Characteristics of metification. First of all, we have breaking the fourth wall. Now this is breaking the barrier between reader and writer, and it often blurs the lines between fiction and what is real life. Then, number 2, we get self-reflective. This is when an artist is reflecting on the artistic process of writing, what it means to be a writer, and what goes into the process of actually sitting down and writing a creative piece. And then thirdly, experimental. This is experimenting between the role of the narrator and the relationship to the storyline. Are they first person? Are they third person? Are they omnipresent? It's all of this experimentalness going into metification. Examples of metification. First up is one of the oldest English literature examples ever, the Canterbury Tales, written in 1387 by Geoffrey Chaucer. Here, or in this novel, it parodies the conventional elements of fiction, the protagonist, the antagonist, the storylines. It also blends linguistic styles, it breaks the fourth wall, and it addresses the audience directly. Then the next example we have is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Perhaps you've seen the series. Here, Offred is the narrator and often lets her own thoughts and ideas comment on the oppression of women. And this is definitely a comment on the human condition. Then we get The Truman Show. The Truman Show is a movie that follows Truman, but soon he realizes that his whole world is actually a reality TV show, and the only catch is that he was unaware the entire time. And then we get the movie Deadpool. I'm sure many of you have seen this movie, and how Deadpool often stops scenes to make commentary about the storyline or to narrate the story further. The context of a poem and the poet. Understanding the background of the poet will help you in understanding poetry, and it's very important, especially when you're doing unseen poetry. If we are aware of a specific theme that is consciously present in a writer's work, we can look out for those elements in their poetry. An example of this is Shakespeare and his sonnets. Shakespeare was utterly obsessed with life, death, and transcending death. Most of the 154 sonnets deal with at least one of these themes. Knowing these facts helps us understand unseen poetry, or at least gives us a little bit of a head start. Let's look at an example on the next slide. This is Sonnet 130 by Shakespeare. My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hair be wires, black wires grow on her head. I seen roses damask red and white, but no such rose see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never see a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. Now, in this poem, the poet or the speaker here is addressing his elderly mistress who's aging. The speaker isn't too excited about this fact. In fact, he actually insults her. You can see by the highlighted lines that I've done here. If hairs be wires, black hairs grow on her head. So she's getting grey hairs. And then, but no such rose see I in her cheeks. Her skin is starting to dull with age. And then if we move on to the next line I highlighted, than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. So he's saying that her breath stinks. And then the last two lines over there that I highlighted, I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. So he's saying over here that he likes to hear her speak, but he really much more likes to hear music playing in the background. we understand that Shakespeare had these obsessions with life and death. And then, if we look at the rhyming couplet right at the end of the poem, we have the change or turn. And yet, by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare. So in the end, he basically admits that even though she's aging, he still loves her. But by knowing the fact that Shakespeare was obsessed with life and death, we had an insight into this poem. The relationship between form and meaning. Form includes line length, rhyme, stanza length, meter, and repetition of an overall structure of a poem. The set formats of poetry include the sonnets, Italian or Shakespearean, the haiku, limericks, and villanelles. By understanding the different forms of poetry, we can actually predict certain elements and understand how poems are written and set out. Let's look at common forms of poetry that you will come into contact with on the next slide. These are examples of the two most common forms of poetry that you've definitely come into contact by now. First up is the Italian sonnet or the Petrarchan sonnet. It has 14 lines, 2 stanzas with an octet and a sestet. It is written in the iambic pentameter meter. The rhyme scheme is ABBA, ABBA, CDE, CDE. Some variations of this rhyme scheme exist for at least the last 6 lines, but definitely the first 8 are always ABBA. And then we have the volta or turn in line 9. Secondly, we have the Shakespearean or English sonnet. 14 lines with 3 quatrains of 4 lines each and a rhyming couplet at the end. It is also written in the iambic pentameter meter, and the rhyme scheme is as follows: A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. We often find the volta or turn in line 9, but it can also be in the rhyming couplet. Alright, Junior Tuckies, I hope this lesson helped you to understand the analysis of poetry better. Next up is visual literacy.